glad you found me. It's about time, don't you think, that you come and join us.
What's up, everybody? It's Contract Lancer trying out a new position now. Let me know how it looks like to you, and if you like it, put it in the comments. If you don't like it, let me know. I'd rather not make out with the camera anymore, but I will keep making out with this thing, unfortunately. It is what it is. Anyways, get to the content. Yes, it is true. 70% of people interviewing that do not have this technology in their resume or experience with this technology will fail the interview. It is just that important these days to know what this technology is. Now, some of you might have a good idea what I'm talking about, but if you don't worry. We're going to be discussing and go a little bit in depth on how to use it and why I say that you need to adopt this technology if you do not. Now, this could be far more helpful for those of you who have been in the game a little bit longer because this technology is a little bit new. But for those of you who are just trying to get into the game, be sure to get the experience using this. It is easy, it is open source, it is free, and you have no excuses. On this channel, I try to give you all the options you can get to be a programmer, whatever programmer you want to be. I don't care if you want to go into an open source framework or you want to go into a proprietary one. As long as there's market value in it, as long as it's been proven, you will make six figures as long as you keep at it, as long as you keep up the work. However, in this case, the one and only case that I've seen where technology is so ubiquitous, a technology that ranges so far in basically any single industry you will get into, a technology that even Microsoft, who at one point created a proprietary version of this technology, decided to scrap that and adopt the one I'm about to discuss today. In fact, they use this both internally and externally. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, this little technology I'm sure you've heard of is called Git. So you better get good if So what is Git? Git is a version control technology that most corporations use these days. Git is used to make sure that you track changes in your code and ensure that when you are collaborating with other people, the code base does not go crazy and, basically becomes destabilized because everybody's putting in changes and stuff all the time, and you might run over someone else's changes. That's a very bad scenario, and that can lead to many problems, and Git is there to mitigate that. So you already know what Git is, or if you don't, I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper later on. But where do I get that 70% number? Well, first, I have this number from two places. On Wikipedia, the number is actually 87%. 87% being the adoption rate of Git for all people who use version control systems. That means that most corporations use this, and most corporations will expect you to have some experience in it if you want to apply for them. That's 87% though. Where do I get the 70% number? Well, the 70% number I actually get from Stack Exchange. Someone did some research up to about 2019 that showed them the adoption rate is about 70%, more or less, according to them. So, I didn't actually do a back check on them or anything. If there's these two numbers that are very high, then I suspect that there's some truth to it, and that the adoption rate is also super high, and that if you don't have Git experience, it's going to be detrimental to you. So that's what I say when 70% of the interviews that you take without Git experience will fail, is because I believe that most corporations are going to ask that you have this experience. So how do you get this Git experience if you don't have any, or how do you get some practice? It's actually very easy. There's a few ways to do it. There is the command line that you can use. Git is actually, I believe, a Linux program. So I believe you could run it through PowerShell if you're using Windows, or you could run it through the actual Git bash, which is the command line. But you have to just learn a little bit of shell script. There's also a GUI that's out there called SourceTree that you can use with Git as well. I use SourceTree all the time for my little personal projects. I find it to be much easier than writing all the commands and stuff, especially since you're going to be using the same commands over and over again. And I'll go over some of the commands that you should know because they're going to ask you for this on the interview. These are the most common ones that you'll see. There are others that you can get into for special cases, but these are the ones that you will mostly be using in Git. What I forgot to mention before is that you need one other thing in order to actually practice using Git and how to make sure that you're doing it correctly, is that you need a remote repository. Now, this is what GitHub is for. GitHub is basically the repository for all the products that go into it. But if you don't want to use that, you could use something like Bitbucket as well. I find Bitbucket to be a lot easier to use. It has a GUI as well. As long as you know the main commands in there, as long as you understand the process, it's okay if you use like the GUI shortcuts, because basically everyone uses some sort of shortcut. If you're working with Microsoft stuff, they're going to be using the shortcut on the Visual Studio or the Visual Studio Code portion. And if not, then you're probably going to be running the same couple of commands over and over again if you're using the command line. But you could always look them up online in case you forget them or something. I always forget them, but as long as you understand the process of doing it, you'll be fine. Before I get started on what I'm about to show you, I'm going to show you some commands. And to tell you that this is not a tutorial video, this isn't, how to go from point A to point B. These are just a refresher on the main commands that I find to be the most used commands, and also the commands that you'll find on the interviews when they give you an interview on Git, basically. So I went to this website. It's called Common Git Commands from Beanstalk Guides. So you can also get this on the Git website itself if you want to. But they just put most of the commands that I would test you on are the commands that I would also use on a daily basis when using Git. So to get started, you have git add. Git add is just adding files to the staging area. The staging area is basically all the changes that you're going to commit into your local repository. So a quick guide on how Git works is that Git gets changes from somewhere. You create a copy of those changes locally, and then that's where you start coding and stuff. So all your changes that you're making is going to be done locally before you push them into some place like in a remote branch or a remote repository. And that's how other collaborators get the code. So you all make a copy of the source code basically in your local environment on your computer basically. And then you start making changes on your computer. And then when you're done making changes, you push them into the remote environment, the repo, so that other people can get those changes. And then you also grab the same changes from them from the repo as well. And these are the commands that will facilitate that process. That is how Git keeps track of all the changes. That's how you grab changes. That's how you make changes to the original source code in the repo. So with that in mind, you have git add. This is how you actually add changes to be committed. You haven't committed the changes yet, but these are changes that you want to commit to your local environment right now. We're not in the repo just yet. This is just your local changes. Git commit basically means that you will commit those changes to the local environment. You're done with your changes. You've accepted them. They are going to be put into the local repository. Git branch. Git branch is a way of separating the changes that you're making. So if you're working on like a feature or something, you make a branch specific maybe to that feature, but your actual local source code is not affected just yet. You just have it on that local branch. So if you create two branches and you start making changes, you could actually make different sets of changes coming from the same source code, knowing that that source code is not unchanged until you push those changes into that source in your local repository. Git checkout, this is just how you switch branches. So if you want to work on one feature, then work on a different one or something, or work on one piece of change, one change in code, and go to a different one. That's how you do it. You do git checkout, then the branch name, and that's how you switch branches. Git merge is how you make the branches merge together, aka how you make sure that the changes from two different branches are put into one. So you'll still have a copy of the last branch, but one of those branches that you're merging into will have a copy of the changes from both the original branch and the one that you're merging into it. So you do this if you feel that you're ready to go. You wanna start committing things and making sure they play together nicely. If you're working on different features, then you merge them together and then you start doing your testing and stuff. That's how merging works. Git remote. This is more. It's becoming more and more ubiquitous because of the cloud environment and the fact that you typically work with collaborators and other places. So all of you're grabbing your source code from a remote repo, a remote repository, and this is how you have access to it. So using this command, that's how you grab your changes. No, this is not how you grab changes. This is how you connect to it. You do the grabbing and the pushing of changes with other commands, with these two commands here. So git pull, basically I'm grabbing changes from somewhere. I'm either pulling them from the remote repository and pushing and putting them into my local side. So if you do a git pull from remote repo, you grab all the changes that people have made into that remote, and those are the latest changes. Git push is the opposite, is where you're pushing your changes from local to the remote so that other people can grab those changes from the remote repo. So those are the or on Git Stash, I guess. I'll go over Git Stash real quickly. It's important because it gives you an option to keep your changes without actually removing your changes without actually getting rid of them. So what that means, let's say you're working on something, you have an issue with some feature, you want to undo your changes, but you don't want to get rid of all your work, so you stash them so that they're no longer in the branch, they're no longer going to be committed or anything, but you still have those changes there in case you want to pop them back into place. So I use this a lot for debugging purposes. I use this a lot when I want to make sure that the change I'm doing is not going to be it's going to be bad for the program. It's going to be what I expect it to be. And typically that's how you would go about testing them. And that's basically it. Those are the 7 commands I would study up if you're interviewing. And these are the 7 commands that you'll be using a lot, either through a GUI interface or through the actual bash. So even though that wasn't really a tutorial of how to go use Git from A to Z, it is a refresher. It is highlighting what the key commands are going to be. And it's also what are the commands that you'll probably be tested on during an interview if you're going to go into one, especially you younger guys out there who they're going to test you on everything in the sun in order to prove your worth. So it is what it is. But if you have this under your belt, if you understand how this works and you've gotten some practice on it, you will be fine. Without Git, life's going to get a little harder because you'll either get the job and not know how to use Git, or you won't get the job because you don't know how to use Git. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that sense. I hope that you get something out of this. I really hope that if you don't have the Git experience, you get some and get good with it very quickly. I'm going to keep using Git until the end of the video, and hopefully something cuts me off. And I hope you have a good day. Like and subscribe to me. Please get me those views.